I'd heard of this paper several years ago. It comes up in various books and podcasts or whatever, and you can just download it, with a quick Google search. But I've had it for a couple of years, and I've never gotten around to actually reading it. Then I thought, why not give AI a go? So I did. So here, I've gotten the paper, Inequality and Democratic Responsiveness, and just told ChatGPT to summarise it. And here's what I got. Summary of Inequality and Democratic Responsiveness. Who gets what they want from government? 2004. This influential paper investigates how closely US government policy aligns with the preferences of citizens from different income groups. 754 questions on policy changes asked between 1992 and 1998, and finds striking inequalities in democratic responsiveness. Handy with the AI that it neatly summarises it. If I'd written this, it would have been all over the place. Key findings. 1. Government response to the wealthy. Shock, surprise. But this is based on data. This is based on what has actually happened. Here we are looking at many years, and we can see not what we imagined, what we believed, but what actually happened. We have pretty much raw data. When low and high income Americans disagree, actual policy outcomes strongly reflect the preferences of the affluent, 90th income percentile. Preferences of middle and low income Americans, 10th and 50th, have little to no independent impact on policy. So basically, what the very rich want is reflected by policy change. What the rest are pretty much ignored, or don't make any difference. Which, seems quite different to what I would have thought democracy is. If it's supposed to reflect the people, then surely the middle, what most people want, should have made a difference. Some difference. As opposed to little or no impact. 2. Equal preferences equals equal outcomes. Superficially. On many issues, rich and poor Americans share similar preferences. In these cases, policy appears responsive to all, but this masks deeper inequality. When preferences diverge, only the rich matter. Good that they, looked at each of these. Again, this is a summary. It's, if you want the full details, it's in the paper. But as I said, I've had it for a couple of years and I've never got around to looking at it, so handy that I can get this condensed version. 3. Salient issues see more responsiveness. Public opinion matters more when people have well-formed views. When fewer survey respondents say, don't know. So public opinion matters more if the public can be educated. Still, the affluent maintain disproportionate influence even on salient issues. So the difference is less, but it's still disproportionate. Status quo bias. Policy change is rare. Even when 90% of Americans support a policy, it only passes about 40% of the time, due to systemic barriers like veto points and supermajority requirements. 5. Policy preferences by income. Economic policies. Rich Americans favour tax cuts, e.g. capital gains and free trade. Poor Americans support redistributive measures, like raising the minimum wage and national health care. Social policies. Rich Americans tend to be more liberal on abortion and gay rights, but more conservative on affirmative action. Welfare. Both groups supported welfare to work reforms, but the rich also supported limiting benefits. 6. Causal direction. While causation is hard to prove, Gillens, if that's how you pronounce it, argues that the data best support the view that affluent Americans influence policy rather than the other way around. He contrasts income and education to test if attention, education, or influence, income, matters more. Income wins. It's a nice and thorough study. 7. Campaign donations and influence. Political donations, dominated by wealthy Americans, likely play a major role in this unequal responsiveness. Conclusion. Gillens concludes that American democracy is heavily skewed towards the wealthy. While the political system formally grants equal representation, in practice, the influence over public policy belongs primarily to those at the top of the income distribution. When the preferences of the poor and the rich align, all may get what they want, but when they diverge, only the wealthy prevail. Interesting. Then I remembered that actually the first paper like this I downloaded was from Cambridge or Cambridge University Press. So I looked again on Google, and in fact it was this paper. Testing Theories of American Politics. Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. So you're not breaking it into the top 10% wealth-wise, the 50th percent, like the middle, and the bottom 10%, or whatever way it was broken in the first paper. It's elites, interest groups, and average citizens. Again, it's Gillens and also Benjamin. And this is 2014, so 10 years later, still 10 years ago, because this is 2025. This groundbreaking study investigates who truly influences US public policy. Average citizens, economic elites, or organized interest groups, by analysing 1,779 policy issues from 1981 to 2002. So this is even better. It's a more recent paper. It's 81 to 2002, so over 20 years, while the earlier paper was, about under 10 years? So, main findings. 1. Average citizens have little influence. When controlling for the influence of elites and interest groups, the preferences of average Americans have virtually no independent impact on policy outcomes. Good that they don't beat about the bush. That is pretty bad to hear. Again, supported by lots of data. And there's more detail. This is a summary. There's more detail in the paper, whose name I gave at the start. If you just Google it, it's easy to download. It's free. No barriers to get it. Economic elites have strong influence. Policies strongly reflect the preferences of Americans at the top of the income ladder, top 10%, supporting the economic elite domination theories. And I don't know these various theories, but the name kind of gives it away. Business interest groups are powerful. Organized interest groups, especially business groups, exert substantial independent influence, confirming biased pluralism. Business-oriented groups have nearly twice the policy impact of mass-based groups. So, if you were concerned that the elite, the top 10%, basically run the show, good to know that business groups have, twice? Yeah, have nearly twice the influence of mass-based groups. So whatever the mass-based groups do are well down the pecking order. 4. Majoritarian theories are weak. Theories that say government policy reflects the will of the majority, like median voter models, are not supported. So that is what I would have thought. Not that I thought much about it, but it would have been the assumption. That is what, in a way, if you say this is a democracy, I would have thought that means that the government policy reflects the will of the majority. Not so. Similarly, the idea that interest groups reflect the broad public's interest is not supported either. So it's even worse. 5. Policy change is rare, even with public support. Even when 80% of Americans support a change, it happens less than half the time. The US system is deeply status quo based due to its institutional design. Implications. US democracy is highly unequal in terms of policy influence. Ordinary citizens win policy outcomes mostly by coincidence, when their views happen to align with those of elites or powerful groups. The system is formally democratic, with elections, free speech, etc., but substantively oligarchic, dominated by the wealthy and organized business interests. There it is. Again, thank you, ChatGPT, breaking it into kind of digestible small bits. And you can, it's eager to help. Talking points or quotes for sharing, visual diagram. But what I was thinking was, well, here's the question. Have similar studies been done in European countries? Because, I mean, it was good, very good work, but it's always talking about America. And I'm not in America. What's it like here? Yes, scholars have indeed conducted similar research in Europe, largely confirming patterns of unequal democratic representation, favouring richer citizens and elites. So it's pretty much the same here. Again, it gives more detail. EU, key European findings. 1. Systematic review shows wealth-based responsiveness across democracies. A major systematic review of cross-national and single-country studies finds that, like in the US, the wealthy have more political influence in countries, including Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. If I click here, it has 15 references. You can go in to more detail, which is good to know. 2. Country-specific studies. Switzerland. Only preferences of high-income citizens significantly predict referendum outcomes. 2. Germany and the Netherlands. Researchers Elsasser, Hense and Schaefer, and I'm not going to try and pronounce all the names, so I'll just move on, replicates Gillen's design and found similar bias towards affluent citizens. Again, so we have 4 papers to cite. Denmark found wealthy Danes' preferences strongly shaped policy, and this responsiveness seems linked to information advantage among the rich. Norway and Sweden report the same pro-rich skew in responsiveness. A large-scale comparative analysis covering 3,000 policy proposals across 30 democracies confirm a consistent, though varying, slight edge to the rich. Slight edge in quotation marks. In policy congruence, meaning their policy preferences were more likely to align with enacted policies than those of lower income groups. Broader context and explanation. Depoliticization of policymaking. Economic decisions like monetary fiscal policy, in Europe have been taken out of public democratic control, benefiting economic elites. Elite networks and lobbying. Organisations like Corporate Europe Observatory expose how large firms and wealthy individuals exert influence through expert groups and lobbying, e.g. the financial industry. The financial industry spends €120 million annually lobbying EU institutions, with experts closely tied to industry. Elite attitudes towards democracy. Studies of Europe's wealthy elites, e.g. in Finland, reveal growing scepticism of democratic decision-making, viewing it as inefficient and preferring technocratic governance, which suggests that if things are bad now, it's more likely to get worse. It's more likely to become a technocratic governance, where we don't even pretend to be a democracy anymore. Conclusion. Yes, Europe shares with the US a tendency towards unequal responsiveness in democratic systems. The rich and organised elites have greater independent impact on policy, though the bias is often somewhat less extreme. The phenomenon is widespread, present in countries across Western and Northern Europe. Contributing factors, like information disparities, the insulation of economic policy making from democratic processes, and organised elite influence through lobbying and advisory networks. So then, I just thanked the AI. That's excellent. Not so much for the findings, but don't blame the messenger. To which it replied, totally fair. It's a bleak picture. But knowing the landscape is the first step towards changing. If you want to delve deeper into how activists, unions, or grassroots movements have pushed back against these trends, and sometimes won, I'm happy to pull that together too. Always here to help. Messenger's honour, which was unexpected. So not only can AI help in determining how gloomy and bad the situation is with direct sources, so I'm not relying on, oh, I saw that from AI. I have the papers, and their papers have the citations of the data that their analysis was based on. But it can also help a counterattack. And that is the end of part 1, where we get to see what the problem is that we're facing. Step 2 is where we look at this. What methods have been used to counter this? How have they done? What works? What hasn't? Till then.